In this video, we're going to do a little review of your submissions, and we're going to go over some concepts that I hope will change the way you approach design, and also that you can see some of the advantages of actually paying attention to the concepts we're going to cover in this course. So the first question I'm going to ask is, are you a designer or are you an artist? Okay, and before we decide this, let's go over some of the characteristics of each one. So a designer, the purpose is to self-express something. You know, the designer needs to fulfill a very specific needs. From the perspective of the audience, the designer seeks understanding and communicates something. The artist can leave it up to interpretation. The approach for a designer needs to be systematic. Why? Because you need to be able to explain what you do to your stakeholders, to your teammates, to your clients, you know, and very often you're going to be working with a group of people. So each one of them needs to understand who are you in the process and what everybody fits within that system. For an artist, the approach is inspiration. So an artist can work whenever it's inspired. Some of them are very disciplined, you know, and they might also follow their own system, but it's not required. Now, the constraints. For the artist, there are really no constraints except the ones that are self-imposed. For a designer, needs to follow specifications. So the point here again is the purpose. Self-expression for the artist, and the designers, for the designers, the purpose is to fulfill a specific need. They need to create a product that satisfies a need. Now, take a second and think about it, about this concept. How do you behave, like an artist or like a designer? Right, think about it. You can pause the video, then continue. Now, be honest about the way you're doing things, okay? Now, let's go on. So I'm going to assume that you already did that, and I'm going to continue with this. All right, let's talk about systematic approach to design. What do I mean by that? All right, there's the basic approach to design, you know, and there are many different systems. All of them really boil to this thing, all right? So first is to analyze. Without an understanding of what we're doing, we can create the most beautiful product and it will fail because it won't fulfill the need. So your design needs to be based on a careful analysis and understanding. This understanding is not only of what is expected of the product, but you also have to consider your timelines and your constraints. For example, if somebody asks me to do a website, I'm not going to produce a website if they need it by tomorrow than a website that is needed in 2 weeks, because I'm going to have more time to work on it. So those constraints, I need to be able to analyze those. Also need to, I mean, there's a lot of things. Now, once you design, and by design, I don't mean to go into the computer and start creating HTML and CSS. What I mean by design is going on paper, design a wireframe, design a concept or 3 or 4 concepts, you know, then refine them and then present that wireframe or that design proposal to my client, to make sure I am really kind of in tune with what they need and what they want. This is going to save me the time of having to develop something on HTML and CSS, which will take me more time, just to find out that that's not what they want. The other thing that doing my design on paper is going to do is actually going to provide me with buy-in from the client, right? So based on my design, I'm going to develop. Now, because I spent so much time on the design, actually not a lot of time on the design, because I already did a design, my developing time is going to be shorter. Now, developing time is the most expensive part of creating a product, the developing of the product. That's why it's important to make sure you have done all the previous work, analyzing and designing and developing. Designing is not jumping in the computer and start pounding on the keys, right? The last thing I need to do here is test. So testing is important because I want to make sure that my product is actually solving the issue, make sure I don't have spelling errors, make sure I'm not making blunders with the color, make sure I'm considering all my constraints, all the limitations that I have, that the materials are okay, and that the product is actually going to be produced to specifications. So that is important. There are several parts of testing. I do my own tests where I'm trying to find fault with what I did, and I also ask people to check my work and try to break my design. I beg them to break it, to please find something wrong with it so I can fix it, because I want to find this out before it goes to my client. Now, when you go to the industry, you're gonna find that a lot of people use this other system, which is really the same. This is called the design thinking process. Now, they broke analyze into two parts. Empathize, which means to relate to the customer, to relate to the client, and to understand how they work and what are the constraints and all that. From that, you're going to come out with a definition of the problem. That's the second phase of this process. The definition of the problem is a basic statement that tells you this is what I need and this is what I needed and this is the issue it's going to solve. Once you have that very clear, you're going to go to ideate, which is the equivalent of design. It's the same thing. It's where you're gonna do your brainstorming, you're gonna do your sketches, your prototypes, you're gonna do your wireframes, you're gonna do your storyboards, whatever paperwork you need to do, whatever work you need to do on paper, in order to come up with a concept. Once you get buy-in again, then you go to prototyping, which is the same as developing. Okay, prototyping is actually working on it, and then again you test. So that's the same. Now you notice that I have a dotted line on the bottom. That means that this is a model. So we're representing it in a linear way, but sometimes you're gonna find something on the design phase, and then you might want to go back to the analysis. You might want to find something on the develop phase. You might want to go back to the design or even to the analysis to correct or to double check that you're actually doing correctly. And even on the testing phase, you're gonna find problems, so you need to go back to again analysis, design, or the develop process to fix that. So the representation is linear, but the process itself is iterative. So that means it's recursive, it's continuously changing, or it might be that. All right, so keep that in mind. This is how you need to approach design if you are a designer. If you're an artist, by all means, go jump on the computer and start creating what you want, but this is what successful designers do. And again, this is not something that is coming from a school. This is something that is coming from years of experience in the field. Okay, now let's this point, what I'm going to ask you to do is to go ahead and pull your boarding pass, and we're going to do a reflection on it. All right, so and before we continue, I want to let you know that you have been set up for this. You have been set up for failure, okay? Because some of these concepts, you really don't know them. We haven't talked about it. So this is on purpose. But don't feel bad about the design if you did a good job, that is not important. The important thing is, like, after you done your design, consider the concepts that we're going to be discussing and see how knowing that ahead of time will have changed the way you went about the designing of the boarding pass. And also, I want to make sure that you think about, consider, and evaluate, and you make a decision if the information you're going to be getting has any value for your future assignments that you're going to get. All right, and for even for professional work, actually for professional work, because all this is coming from there. All right, so let's see. Oh, the mantra: design is based on function. Okay, so when you're done with your project, the last question should be, does it work? If the answer is no, you need to go back and work on it. If it does work to perfection, you did a good job and it's ready for production. All right, so first question for you: what guided your design process? Now think about it. I would like you to actually pause the video and think about it. How did you go about the design process? I'm assuming you already had a few seconds, so here it is. If you didn't have a specific answer, or if you had trouble coming up, it's a clear sign that you are not following a process, or you're not following the right process. You need to be able to explain how you got to do what you did when you designed that boarding pass. And the example is a boarding pass, but it can be anything else, a poster, a business card, doesn't matter. Now, Steve Jobs said something. Design is not how it looks, it's how it works. Keep that in mind. Okay? Now, what you needed to know before redesigning the boarding pass. What was the purpose of the boarding pass? You needed to understand what is the function of each one of the elements. You will need to be able to prioritize the importance of each element based on the function of that piece of information. That is going to frame the user experience. So you're going to take your boarding pass, and based on the hierarchy of the information is how good or how bad the user experience is going to be. You need to you need to understand all the related and external constraints: the budget, production cost, timeline, stakeholder roles, and support equipment. In this case, it was an assumption, so you could have taken liberty for all that, but you're gonna see that there are some things that are very obvious about this project. Now, this understanding is what will guide the visual treatment of a product. So you see what happened here. Function guides the design, and the visual treatment is what creates the function. So, all right, now let's look at the purpose of the boarding pass. So it's a very simple one: getting the passenger from the door to the airport to their seat in the airplane. On time, I might add, because that's also important. So, who are the users of our product? Now, this seems like a simple question, and you might be, well, that's very obvious, come on, man, the passenger, and you are absolutely right. So the primary user is the passenger. However, there are other people involved in the process. Okay, the airport and airline employees, they also need to interact with your product. See, so we added a second level of importance to this thing. The primary user is the passenger, but there you have also secondary, and potentially you can have maybe another level of users as well. Now, for simplicity, we're going to focus only on the primary user. But remember, if this was a project that we will be actually working on, something as simple as boarding pass will need a lot of care and work to make sure it works with the system in place. Because remember, there are thousands, probably hundreds of thousands of people flying every day, and there are thousands of people involved in this process. So something as simple as a boarding pass needs to be approached with a lot of care. All right, so now reflect on this for a second. Again, pause the video if you want to, and think: did you structure the information based on function, or did you structure the information based on what will look good? Be honest. So, what are the content elements that will help us get the passenger to the board of the plane? You should have identified this before designing the boarding pass. Now let's look at them. So it's the date, the time, terminal, the gate, the boarding group, and the seat number, in that order. So first we need to know the date, then the time, what terminal, what gate, what boarding group, and our seat number. That's the key information from the perspective of the passenger. Remember, we're ignoring the needs of the secondary audience, which will be the name of the person and all that thing. All right. So now, did your design give visual weight to these information elements? Be honest. Some of you did, some of you didn't. Now, did you use what you know about visual communication design skills to make the product work? So see, the main thing is not how it looks again, is how it works. But you use what you know about visual design, so your principles of design, alignment, use of color, typography, graphics, all that, you use that to give meaning to your product, to make sure it works again. Now, first thing I noticed in a lot of the submissions, which is, it's okay again, use of color. Now let's look at this. So, should I use or not use color? An artist will say, yeah, why not? I'm gonna use color because I can make things cool, right? Well, a designer will consider, what is the lifespan of a boarding pass? For how long we use a boarding pass? what is it, 20, 25 minutes maybe, from the time you get to the airport, to the door of the airport and get your boarding pass to the time you actually board the plane. So 20 minutes. Now, there's a cost of having color versus the purpose of the ticket, right? So how will color impact the cost? The color printing is more expensive, and it also requires color printers in each airport. Can you imagine the spend of having boarding passes with color? So consider how that affects your product. So when we look at this, there's no logical justification for using color on a boarding pass. It doesn't matter how beautiful the boarding pass is, because some of them are. You guys did a good job on that. But I hope that you can see that how function trumps visual treatment, not the other way around. So all these tickets will need to go back to the design table for that. All right, now let's continue. I also noticed that some of you added a receipt, right? Now, so once we turn the boarding pass, do we need to keep it? How will the addition of the receipt affect the boarding pass? See, now if you have a receipt, now you have the people that are welcoming to the airplane, they have to cut that and give half to you. And why do you need half of a boarding pass? You really don't. Once you're on the plane, the boarding pass is useless. Okay. Now let's think about how will our stakeholders react to such change. So if you just went and added a receipt, they're probably gonna be confused, and this is gonna be a big issue. I think you will be calling to an office, okay, if you did this, because it's the design, but now you're affecting the function of that product. So careful with that. So again, this will need to be back to the design table. All right, now I'm gonna do an individual critique on your submissions, and I want you to keep some things in mind, okay? Remember, I already told you that you were set up, so nobody was expected to do it right, because this is the reason you're taking the class. And I hope by now, those of you that think that you're taking the class because it's required, maybe you're now going to think that you're taking the class because this is going to affect how you do your professional work. Again, this is not an academic exercise. This is real life, right? So designers, the other things to remember, is that designers need feedback. So this is how we continuously improve. For some of us, it's really hard to receive critiques, but you need to learn to do it, because that is a necessity. Now, if you express disgust or anger or frustration or passive aggressiveness about getting feedback, what's going to happen is that eventually the people that is giving you the feedback is going to refuse to give you the feedback, or they're going to tell you that everything is fine. Because they notice that it's something very unpleasant for you. So don't take it like that. Take it like it's a friend, and that friend is giving you feedback because they want you to succeed. So that's my case. I'm giving you that feedback because I need you to learn, and so the next project, the next assignment that you do in real life or in school will actually be better. Okay. Now, before production, we want to find out everything that can be wrong with our product. Now, this is also before a submission. We want to make sure that your assignment is correct. So again, it can be applied to a product or to a class, any class, right? Now, you can listen to the feedback. That's a good thing. And you can decide what to change. You can decide what not to change or what to modify. Sometimes we get feedback and you know what, this is not working, but I don't want to change it. Maybe I can do this instead and fix it this other way. And then you can also decide to ignore the feedback if you have a reason for it. If it's not a good idea, it's going to make it worse, because sometimes we might have ideas that are not really that good. So you don't have to do everything anybody tells you. Just learn how to listen quietly, think the feedback, and then do what you're going to do with it. Use it or not. Now, I also hope that you can use this to change from now on, starting right now. I hope that in this class and other classes and in your professional life, you adopt the design system. Okay, emphasize, define, idea, prototype, test, whatever, or just analysis, design, develop, and test. Same thing. Now, design based on function, not on visual treatment. Okay, it's about communication. It's about the user experience. That's what this class is about. Now, here is the first submission, okay? So in this ticket, we obviously need to remove the color. We also need to remove the graphics from it again. We go back to the issues with the printers, and the lifespan is not working. It's also interfering with it's making it harder to read the numbers that are in front of the palm tree. Now we're going to reorder the content based on function also, like the fly, that can be modified. And also I kind of I did this on purpose again to throw a curveball to you guys. So, it's not a big deal, but A25A can be confusing. So it should be A25A AM, and we need to also format the time, okay? So same with 900A, 940A, all that needs to be changed, right? So, and again, it's a curveball, remember? So, if it was any other project that we need a graphics, it will be a beautiful design. But again, remember, it does not meet the needs. Let's go to submission 2. Okay, so same thing, remove color. Now, this one added a receipt. So we already talked about that. We will need to reorder the content based on function, and again, use AM or PM, and probably the column between 9 and AM to make it clear. Now on this one, I did notice that the shading was a very good way to highlight information. So if we reorder the content based on function, that concept like that can work very, very well for calling the attention to the important information. So this has potential. Now let's look at submission 3. And this one, the boarding pass has been modified, but there seems to be no clear logic behind the change. So they're mostly aesthetic, like adding the little airplanes there, and I noticed some of the fields were changed, but it's basically kind of like the same thing. Now, one thing you cannot do is change the logo. All right, as bad as the one I gave you is, that needs to stay there. And good job on the spelling AM, and adding the column, but notice that it's not consistent. Oh, 9 AM and 9:40 PM. No, that's perfect. Actually, according to style guidelines, very good. That was very good. But again, look at that feedback and think about how would you have done it differently. Now, submission 4. Okay, again, remove color. We already did that. We cannot change the logo. We already talked about that. And there are no changes on the hierarchy of the information from the original. This is exactly the same like that. So this one will need a major redesign using a new concepts. All right. Now let's go to submission 5. Okay. So on this one, remove the color and reorganize the content in boxes. I really like the way to communicate visually the departure and the arrival. I think that this very clear, and this is a good use of visual, applying your visual communication skills. That exactly is what visual communication is about. Nobody's spelling anything. I understand that is leaving the airport in Houston, is going to Phoenix. Now 9 and 9:40 are missing AM or PM. I need to be clearer about that. And also, I really like the concept of organize the content in boxes in that position. That is also very, very readable. And so is the section we has the passenger name, date, time, operated by Green Airlines. This is a ticket that has a lot of potential for being revised a little bit and then being put into production again. So very good job on this one. Let's look at submission. I didn't change the name. Submission 5, submission 6. All right. So this one again, remove the receipt, reorganize the content in boxes, and it also has kind of the same concepts as the other one. So it's visual there, and then you have the boxes. So it's laid out a little bit different, but I think it's very clear. So this is a really, really good submission too. So congratulations, you have the concept, and again, if you apply, I hope you can see that how applying the keeping function in mind and the user experience can make your design a lot better. So what's next? So from now on, and I don't mean for this class, I really, really beg you, do it for life. Behave like a designer. Use a system. Choose whatever system you want, or there's more out there. And what that also is going to do for you, by the way, when you go to work in an industry or something, and they're going to ask you to explain your process and all that, you're already going to be used to do this, because you're going to have the experience of having been doing it for a while. And then if they already have a system, then you can easily implement, get on, because you are already used to doing this, and it's going to be some version of the same thing. So that's not going to be that different. Or even better, if they don't have a system I have been in many places where they don't have a system, and I am able to actually, eventually, there's a need to implement this, and I have been doing a great job of that. So consider this. This is very valuable. And again, design based on function, and let UX, user experience guide the visual treatment. So don't focus anymore on the visuals, focus on the function, and use the visual treatment to create an excellent user experience. By the way, you have 100 on this assignment if you submit it, so congratulations. And second thing I'm going to ask you is keep this under total lid. If you know anybody that is taking the class, please don't share any information about this assignment, because hopefully you realize that it is a good thing. It's not going to affect your grade, but without the emotional impact of not knowing this, it wouldn't be as good. So keep it tight, and I'll looking forward to working with you and seeing you implementing these concepts. Have a fantastic day or evening or morning or whatever. That's it. Signing out.